All right, everybody. It seems like we're live, so let me know if you can hear me and you can see me in the chat, please. And welcome to another Monday night where we're going to discuss things that are happening around the world and here in our country that we should be prepared for and at least understanding the risks of. So, welcome, and let's see. Let's get this thing rolling. We see some good people here in the chat. I've got Welcome to My Life, Tactical Squirrel, or Tactisquirrel, sorry. Exile Reviews, thanks for being here. Thanks for modding. Grisio Nemo, 10-4. Dave Sickles says good evening, and I say good evening as well. Sherman Sales, hello. Chime is here as well, and Max Havoc says 5x5. So I think we're sounding and at least looking decent, the best we can do, at least what we can expect here, right? So thank you all so much for being here, and thank you if you're here on the replay, watching it once again. I appreciate everybody trying to get as much information out of these chats as they can, because, there's a lot going on in the world right now. We kind of have to pay quite a bit of attention. And if there is any theme recently with a lot of our discussions here, it's the subversionary tactics of our foreign adversaries here in the United States, because I don't feel like there's as much awareness being brought about some of the things that are surrounding it, and it is more important than you might realize. Of course, we are often distracted and focused on what's happening over in Eastern Europe, and I understand why, and of course I analyze that when I can as well, or at least bring you the information around it. I don't know if analyzing it is actually the appropriate term for what I do, but it's important to pay attention to that because it could have catastrophic consequences for the rest of the world. However, there are things happening here in the U.S. right now, which means they're likely happening in other Western countries as well, that we should definitely be aware of, because that kind of action that we're experiencing and witnessing right this second could easily lead us into a full-blown SHTF type scenario, especially with some of the attacks that are happening on our infrastructure and our power grid as of right now. So lots of things to get into and lots of things to talk about, and I do want to say thank you all very much. And just so you're aware, if you are part of the Subscribe Star membership, or if you're a YouTube channel member, I do have an exclusive live hangout after this chat tonight that starts at 10 p.m. So for all you channel members, in case you weren't aware, and if you're a Subscribe Star member, that is happening at 10 p.m. tonight. And if you do want to support the channel in ways other than the way you already do, which is much appreciated, then make sure you check out the Subscribe Star, because those are the types of things I'm trying to do more often for those memberships. And I do have some preparedness giveaways that I do, which are beneficial to those who need the stuff. So I just put that in the live chat, a link to the Subscribe Star, and I look forward to seeing all of you at 10 p.m. Now, the very first thing we're talking about tonight is in reference to the video that I put out yesterday, but in case anybody wasn't aware of it or didn't see it, I want everyone to be caught up and on the same page, okay? We have the mysterious laboratory that was uncovered in Reedley, California, and it was ran by China, and this is something that's very interesting because there's a lot of weird stuff happening there, and of course, many of you should be aware of it at this point, especially if you watch this channel, but in case you weren't, basically what happened was a check by code enforcement led to a warrant that found a lot of biological agents within a facility that was not licensed to be housing said agents. And there was lots of testing going on there. There was vials of all kinds of unlabeled liquids. There were mice in the hundreds that were infected with different diseases, including COVID. So there's a lot of interesting stuff going there. And their whole prerogative there was to create COVID-19 tests as well as pregnancy tests, but for some reason they were also housing a lot of dangerous diseases, such as there was herpes, hepatitis, E. coli, malaria, chlamydia, a lot of diseases that have nothing to do with creating those types of tests. So a very let's just call it interesting and concerning scenario unfolding there in California. Now, Reedley is in the Central Valley, and it does have some interesting proximities to it as well. But just to kind of give everybody a quick rundown as to what was going on there so that we're all on the same page. We had the Prestige Biotech was the company that owned the facility, or at least, leased the facility and was operating it. And they were unlicensed in California. They were a Nevada domestic corporation, which many pointed out is generally a good business tactic for taxes and everything else related to why you would file in Nevada as opposed to California. But still, something that is happening in a different state than where they were originally filed. Then we also have their activities being antibody research and production, vaccine research and production, vaccine center located in Osan, Korea. So now we have Korea involved, and they also were part of a publicly traded on the Korean Stock Exchange company based in Singapore. So a lot of interesting international and interstate affiliations going on here that were very odd, and everything didn't really line up to what was supposed to be happening there, but a lot of things were revealed that were very concerning. So if you weren't aware of this, you should definitely look into it more or watch my video from yesterday on it. I did try to give you the best and most pertinent information regarding the situation and some things to think about, especially based on some of the profitability of running these types of labs and everything else that are under the radar, and involvement with Chinese and the Mexican cartels that would probably lead you to believe that there's more coordinated efforts like this one happening throughout the country. If this is happening in this area, it's definitely happening somewhere else too. Now, Reedley, California is also proximal to a military base, which is odd because it seems like very often here in this whole situation we're discussing, which is why are the Chinese infiltrating America and doing things in a subversion tactic style way in order to create chaos and instability, they always seem to be operating nearby military installations. And that is something I think everyone should be aware of as well. And in this case, when it came to Reedley, California's proximity to a military installation, we have the Naval Air Station Lemoore. Okay. And this is just their official webpage, but just to give you an idea of what they're operating in that naval station, this is about 40 miles away from where this lab was found. So understand that not only could this have some implications regarding national security, if this lab was in fact some kind of bioweapons facility of some sort, or who knows what it was they were really trying to accomplish there, the proximity to a military installation could make you believe there might be some correlation to why they would use biological agents to disrupt American military capabilities, right? So just keep that in mind. These are all things that we can't necessarily prove at this point in time, but the proximity is still concerning, okay? This is the official page or information page of the Lemoore Air Station. Welcome to the official website of Naval Air Station Lemoore, home of the Navy's largest master jet base. This irreplaceable air station was commissioned in July 1961. This seemingly remote location was chosen based on two strategic factors: the close proximity to the Navy's seaport facilities, allowing for logistical support, yet far enough away from major population centers to allow unencumbered flight operations and future infrastructure growth, and two, the flexibility in how the base could be built and expanded, because the land surrounding the base were sparsely populated and used primarily for agriculture. So those same things could be applied to why this lab might have been in this area as well. Sparsely populated, lots of space, people aren't really getting in the way of operations and everything else related to that. But also keep in mind that this irreplaceable air station, which has close proximity to the Navy seaport facilities and is definitely an important facility on its own, was close to where this lab was. So it seems like there's always that tie-in between these activities we're finding with China, whether or not it's from acquiring land or establishing spy bases or whatever else is they're trying to do. But very often we see that they are happening nearby military installations. So I think that's definitely something worth keeping in mind. Now, let's see here. Derek Boodle says, I can't fly my plane because it hurts when I pee. And that is exactly what you should be concerned with, right? A lot of interesting things happening there. And now the Navy doesn't have their usual excuse as to why some of those diseases are being spread around. Anyway, I just made a lot of people mad, I'm sure. I want to go ahead and go here real quick and start a quick poll for everybody. And I want to know what you guys think. Let me know in the chat, but you can also answer this poll. But is China indeed establishing, I guess we'll just kind of say, sleeper cells within the United States in order to activate during a time of kinetic involvement, right? And boom, we will go ahead and ask the poll. Because look, I'm not always right about everything. And there are people here who think a lot of this stuff is just hyperbolic. So I think it's important for us to kind of check ourselves every so often and make sure that maybe we're on the same page as the rest of the community. And these are conversations you should be having in your mutual assistance groups as well as with your preparedness group and your family to kind of just see where everybody else's thought process is as well. If your entire mutual assistance group is against this concept and doesn't feel like there's actually any threat from any of these entities that are coming from China, then maybe there's some reason to at least vet or investigate their thought process in order to make sure you're not the one who's actually off kilter here. But from my experience and from talking to those who I know are involved in preparedness in my area or in my local groups, it seems like most people are pretty much on board with this concept. So just something that I wanted to throw out there. Now, we also had an interesting cyber situation occur from China. And look, the news I just reported on is just a few days old. And that's what we try to do here in case you're new to these live streams. We try to review things that have happened in recent time, and sometimes we go back further in history to verify some of those findings from previous reportings. But this is all relatively new information, and I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. I'm not just trying to connect the dots with a bunch of historical data. This is all stuff that's happening like right now, which is what leads you to believe of this evidence of unconventional warfare being more than just evidence at this point in time, almost proof, right? Because the things just keep lining up. So we have secret biolab in the USA, in California, being operated by the Chinese. All right, let's move on from there, because maybe that singular data point isn't enough to convince anybody of these activities happening from our neighbors to the east. And right now, the poll is at 95% yes, 5% no. And those 5% who said no, I totally understand where you're coming from, and maybe you're right. So these are things that we have to vet, but let's go ahead and move into what else is going on. The U.S. hunts Chinese malware that could disrupt American military operations. This is from the New York Times, and I believe this report is from July 29th, okay? American intelligence officials believe the malware could give China the power to disrupt or slow American deployments or resupply operations, including during a Chinese move against Taiwan. Now, this article doesn't necessarily fully vet the entirety of this attack, but there is a lot of speculation that it also affects our power grid and our infrastructure as well, not just military operations. But this is something that is recently happening that shows that there's more unconventional warfare occurring than maybe meets the eye, okay? The Biden administration is hunting for malicious computer code it believes China has hidden deep inside the networks controlling power grids, communication systems, and water supplies that feed military bases in the United States and around the world, according to American military intelligence and national security officials. So apparently this is verified information by multiple agencies within the federal government, but we also have to understand that this says military bases around the world, possibly. And our military bases here stateside are indeed powered by the same grid that powers other parts of the country that are civilians. So keep that in mind when we're talking about some of these scenarios. The discovery of the malware has raised fears that Chinese hackers, probably working for the People's Liberation Army, have inserted code designed to disrupt U.S. military operations in the event of a conflict, including if Beijing moves against Taiwan in coming years. The malware, one congressional official said, was essentially a ticking time bomb that could give China the power to interrupt or slow American military deployments or resupply operations by cutting off power, water, and communications to U.S. military bases. But its impact could be far broader because that same infrastructure often supplies the houses and businesses of ordinary Americans, according to U.S. officials. Now, one thing that I want to make sure to mention regarding that is the fact that this would easily be some sort of a blackmail or fail-safe scenario for if China was to invade Taiwan. And for long, we have speculated here in the preparedness community that an invasion of Taiwan would likely be prefaced by some sort of disruptionary attack, whether or not that would be an EMP, whether or not that would be a cyber attack. And according to this information that's just recently being put out there, it's very likely that the cyber attack scenario is already in place and already capable of that type of disruption of that level. And I know some other people here in the preparedness community have mentioned this, but I do agree with it. These cyber attacks are basically at the same level of catastrophe as an EMP without having to actually detonate any type of device in the atmosphere or however else they would want to unleash an EMP upon the country. A cyber attack can be just as detrimental. Yes, would your vehicle still run? Yeah, most likely it would still be operational. Would your small electronics and everything else still be working the way that they usually would? Of course. But that's the same thing that happens in a natural disaster, right? When a hurricane wrecks the power grid in Florida, everybody's car still turns on, everybody's phone still works, everybody's radios are still working, right? But that doesn't change the fact that the power being out creates panic and chaos, and people immediately start looting and doing all kinds of criminal behavior. So we'd have the same catastrophic effects of an EMP without some of the immediacy in the sense of, okay, well, if you're driving a car and this happens, you're still going to get home possibly, but the power at your house won't be working. And that's still, over time, will lead to that same scenario of Americans turning on Americans in order to get the supplies that they require in order to survive. Because generally, most people aren't going to be able to survive for a few days without power. because they just can't. Once their fridge goes down and their milk is gone and their bread begins to mold, they're done. Because apparently in every natural disaster ever, milk and bread are the most important things you can possibly have. So this is why this is a big concern. And the fact that the U.S. is coming out and admitting that this is a problem and admitting that the Biden administration is looking into it to figure it out, I don't know if this gives you some kind of secondary pause to say, okay, well, they're telling us about it, so is it real or is there more to this, right? I mean, I think there's a lot of speculation that's reasonable at this point in time regarding some of this stuff just because we've been lied to so often, right? But regardless of who decides to eventually pull that proverbial cyber trigger, if this happens, it's terrible for everybody. So, and understand that there is a lot of reason to believe that this is reliably a possibility. More than a dozen U.S. officials and industry experts said in interviews over the past 2 months that the Chinese effort goes far beyond telecommunications systems and predated the May report by at least a year. They said the U.S. government's effort to hunt down the code and eradicate it has been underway for some time. Most spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss confidential and in some cases classified assessments. So this is ongoing and has been going on for quite some time. So in order to ensure that you could have a successful invasion of Taiwan, you would have to put the pieces into place in order to make sure you could pull these cyber triggers at the right time in order to disrupt any type of U.S. response. And if these codes have been implanted for a period of time at this point, how close are we to this actual action? Because that's something that I'm asking myself when I'm considering this information. How much closer have we gotten to that inevitable invasion of Taiwan if these pieces are being planted ahead of time, right? And they've been in there for how long now? So, not to mention pushing the timeline up by investigating it and trying to eradicate it, that might mean that China has to act sooner than maybe they originally planned due to the fact that they know they can't do it if we were to eliminate these malicious codes that are within our systems. So there's a lot of different things going on here when it comes to timeline and when it comes to the immediacy of response required in order to avoid this situation from actually occurring. Now, and look, I'm not actually reviewing this as part of tonight's report, but I do believe that recently Mexico overtook the Chinese as a top U.S. trading partner. So there's a lot of other financial reasons for why some of these things might begin to happen as well. Because not only do you have the military aspect of trying to basically have the edge over your opponent, but then economically, if things start to go south, you have to act even sooner because financing these types of conflicts could be very expensive, right? So there's a lot of things to keep in mind here. Let's see here. Derek Boodle, I am suggesting a Trojan, but not the kind that you're thinking of, unfortunately. So, all right, now we've got Yardbird says, OMG, we could be knocked back to the 90s. Well, first off, no one is prepared for that because I don't have any gene codes anymore. But second off, I think it'd be further than the 90s, unfortunately. And regardless of how far back we went, because a lot of people will use that as an argument and say, well, we've been fine for centuries, in fact, millennia without electricity, so I don't understand why it would be that big of a deal. In fact, I think it might be a more peaceful life, in all honesty. And there's reasons to agree with that sentiment, but then you have to also consider the fact that 95% of the population is unwilling to be uncomfortable at this point in time due to conditioning. And because of that unwillingness to be uncomfortable, that's the part of the population that's going to cause a lot of problems for everyone, regardless of how you feel about it. We might be okay with going back to the Stone Age, but the people down the street who are not might feel like you also deserve to suffer the same way that they are. So keep that in mind. It's not always about what we feel or what we think. Let's see here. Jordande, this past weekend I applied the second Tuesday released MS Windows Server security patch. Let's see, releases to 100 plus servers, and from my understanding, MS did not include protection from this recent malware code. Interesting. Well, thanks for sharing that information, and that is always something you want to keep in mind. I don't really preach like cybersecurity a whole lot on this channel. I have done an advertisement for Aura before, which is like a VPN and a identity protection app, but in all reality, yeah, you should definitely be on top of your cybersecurity situation just to try to give yourself a little bit more of a shield from some of these activities that are occurring. Now, let's go ahead here and jump over to kind of, I guess you could call it like a tit for tat, but more of like a parallel action from the U.S., but also something that shows us that there's a lot more to this People's Liberation Army maybe than a lot of people consider. And it also gives me things to think about that maybe you should all consider as well. U.S. hacked into Chinese earthquake monitoring systems to spy upon underground military bases. Okay, now let's take a quick sip of coffee so we can stay on track. And I got to thank my wife for bringing that to me, so thank you, wife. Now, a recent cyber attack on the Wuhan Earthquake Monitoring Center, which I don't even know if you can say that city's name anymore, but here we are, was carried out by an entity located outside of China, according to a statement issued by the city's Emergency Management Bureau on Wednesday. The center is associated with the Emergency Management Bureau. Okay, I don't know why I had to read that, but they made me. Following the hack launched from outside of China on a Chinese university in June 2022, this is yet another instance of its sort. The investigation team came to the conclusion that the cyber attack was carried out by a hacking organization and lawbreakers with governmental backgrounds who were located in a nation other than the one being investigated, according to information obtained by the Global Times. Preliminary evidence reveals that a government-backed hack on the institution originated in the United States. Okay, interesting enough, good things to understand and be aware of. But here's the thing. There's more to this than just the fact that we hack them too, right? This is, one thing is a reminder that everyone's doing this to each other, right? So the Chinese hacking our military systems and our power grid and our infrastructure isn't surprising because I'm sure we have our malicious codes all over the place as well. But here is what's interesting about this whole thing, okay? What's interesting is what this particular cyber attack can actually detect, all right? Now, let's see. I want to make sure that I can go ahead and find that exact spot here for you. Okay, here we go. Following the incident on NWPU, the CVERC and the Business 360 collaborated to establish a technical team that would carry out an in-depth investigation into the technical aspects of the case. They came to the conclusion that the hack was carried out by the Tailored Access Operations Division of the National Security Agency, NSA, in the United States. Okay. The seismic intensity data refers to the intensity and size of an earthquake, which are two essential indications of an earthquake's destructive potential, as was pointed out by experts in the field. Data on seismic intensity has a tight relationship to national security. For instance, some military defensive installations are required to take into consideration parameters such as seismic intensity, according to the opinions of many specialists. According to a statement made by an expert that was cited by China Central Television CCTV, seismic waves that travel through various subsurface media and structures would generate variations in wave velocity. Hackers can deduce from the underground deduce the underground structure and lithology of a certain area by obtaining relevant data from seismic monitoring centers, the expert added. This information can be obtained by hackers. For instance, it is possible to deduce whether or not there is a large cavity located underground and consequently whether or not it would be a military base or command post. So, not only do we hack them as well, which is understood. We already know that. No big deal there. We're the United States. That's what we do, right? But we're hacking them to possibly find out information about underground military installations, which we know we have many of here in the United States. And one thing that this definitely makes me consider, based on a lot of the information that we're seeing right now, and a lot of the information we're about to discuss, is how many underground installations could be here in the United States related to foreign operations, especially if it's something that they already have access to and already operate with on a regular basis. And if we're at the point where we're hacking into these systems to hack into earthquake monitoring stations in order to find out where some of these subterranean military installations might be, how unlikely is it that there could be some in places like the United States? We have our own. Are the Chinese digging here? I don't know, but let's go ahead and talk about why they could possibly be able to, because there's a lot of reasons to believe they can do a lot considering the amount of land that they've been acquiring. Now, before I do that, I want to jump over here to the chat and just say hello to some people. We got Hunter Moon is here. We got Steven Petrowski. Let's see, Yardbirds is here, as I already discussed, I guess, earlier. We also have Water Tiger. And let's see here. I'm looking for some decent questions or possibly some other information. Harbor Prepper. I love the 80-year-old Curtiss C-46 aircraft in the photo. Well, Harbor Prepper, it looks like you have some good, historical knowledge on aircraft. So that could be useful, All right. And then Yep, I'm just trying to say that guy Scott's name. So I want to make sure everybody feels special. Okay, what else is going on? Well, they're acquiring a lot of land here, and we know that. And we just had this situation occur as well. Mystery group buying land near Air Force Base is suing farmers, Congressman says. So we already know that the Chinese have been acquiring quite a bit of land here in the U.S., including trying to acquire quite a bit of land out here near Grand Forks, North Dakota, where there's an Air Force Base very close by to the land they were trying to acquire. And interestingly enough, they were denied it thanks to legislation here within the state. So one thing I do like about North Dakota is they take those kinds of things relatively seriously. One thing I don't like about North Dakota is that we are definitely a strategic military target for many, many reasons. So here we are. And for anybody who thinks I moved here specifically for the reasons of being better prepared, that is not correct. I moved here specifically for the reasons for being better off financially than the position I was in living in the East Bay of California. But moving here was still better than that. However, yes, there are some considerations to make when it comes to the strategic aspects of living in North Dakota. So trade-offs and compromises. But this is where I am, and one thing's for sure, we have one of the lowest populations in the entire country, which I think is definitely beneficial when it comes to SHTF scenarios, especially when you actually produce more food than you consume as a state. Not a bad place to be. Nuclear-wise, you guys might have to call me a glowing one day. And some of you already do because of other reasons that we're not going to discuss, but I can tell you right now that that is not true, or else I would definitely be way better off when it comes to a pension, a retirement, and insurance. Anyway, Flannery Associates is the name of this mysterious group, have invested more than $800 million on agricultural land. Flannery is suing farmers who sold them land, accusing them of conspiracy. Okay. Congressman, Flannery buying land near Air Force Base raises questions. I agree. All these things seem to happen near military installations. And we also know that there's reason for our NSA and our military to believe that China has underground installations that we're trying to find out more information about, which means that they have experience being underground and being near military bases. I don't know. Oh, and buying land right next door. I don't know if this is true or not, but hey, that facility in Reedley, California, where they had a secret biolab, happened to be 40 miles from a military installation of somewhat importance, right? So let's talk about this now. While questions remain about a mystery company buying 52,000 acres of land near an Air Force base, a congressman says farmers in the area are being targeted in a lawsuit. Representative John Garamendi, Democrat California, has been speaking out over the past 5 years about the $800 million in land acquisitions by Flannery Associates near Travis Air Force Base in Northern California. A couple things to keep in mind here. First off, this is also in California. I think we have to at least, at the very minimum, when it comes to some of these happenings, especially related to these foreign entities, we have to at least consider the idea of complicity. Okay, whether or not we have direct involvement is a different story, but complicity is highly possible in my opinion at this point in time, especially based on some of these other states that are involved with interesting behavior regarding some of this information. And we're going to talk about another state later on here in the chat, or actually relatively soon here, that is also having some of their own rule changes that aren't necessarily beneficial when it comes to this exact topic. Okay. In an interview with News Nation, Garamendi said he's been in contact with the families of farmers who handed over their land to Flannery. He said they didn't want to sell in the first place. Since no California laws require them to sell, the land was bargained for by both parties at a much higher price. But now Flannery is suing those families for $510 million, accusing them of conspiring together to inflate the value of the land. It's a suit designed to force the farmers to lawyer up, spend tens of thousands of dollars on lawyering, and maybe at the end of the day bankrupt themselves, Garamendi said. In fact, that has happened to at least one family that I know of, and I've heard rumors that another family simply said we can't afford the lawyers. News Nation reviewed a copy of the lawsuit. Attorneys for Flannery said they believe this is a simple case about a group of wealthy landowners who saw an opportunity to conspire, collude, price fix, and illegally overcharge Flannery. But Garamendi said there's no viable economic reason to justify spending several times more than what the land is worth in the first place, which means Flannery had a strategic reason for needing that land and was willing to overpay for it regardless of how they're acting now. They're willing to overpay for it, maybe with the idea of being able to recuperate some of those losses from the farmers themselves thereafter via lawsuit, but regardless, they really wanted that land. The suit comes as companies with ties to China have been ramping up efforts to buy American farmland in recent years. Public records show Flannery Associates have invested more than $800 million on more than 50,000 acres of land surrounding the Travis Air Force Base since 2018. Legal representation for Flannery, and this is where it gets interesting, so bear with me here. Legal representation for Flannery said the group is controlled by U.S. citizens, with 97% of its capital coming from U.S.-based investors. But after 8 months of investigation, federal officials, not journalists, not reporters, but actual federal officials, can't confirm or deny this to be true, and have not been able to determine exactly who is backing the company. The Air Force's Foreign Investment Risk Review Office is currently investigating Flannery Associates. Garamendi said there are valid concerns that Flannery's land acquisitions could be tied to foreign enemies. Now, this is interesting because you would think that the Air Force would be able to relatively easily figure out who this giant conglomerate is when they spend $800 million on 50,000 acres of land. And for some reason, they're still having a hard time. The fact they chose to buy all three sides of the Travis Air Force Base even raises immediate questions about national security. So is this Chinese money? We don't know, but we do know that the Chinese money was being used in North Dakota, and we have a very deep suspicion, given the amount of money, given the lack of attention to values, that they simply want to acquire all of this land. So understand that there's a lot of multifaceted actions happening in our country right now regarding foreign entities and adversaries, 90% of which are China related. Regardless of who the finger eventually gets pointed to, the financing often comes from over there. The Widow's Diary artist and poet. Good to see you as well. Glad you're here. Rob Sinelli is here. I appreciate it. He says Biden's would know who. No, don't give too much credit there. I'm sure they wouldn't remember. Let's see. And then we have Hudson Valley Prepping and Survival here as well. I appreciate that. And Cherokee Survival says, yeah, a tunnel from China to the U.S. Now, that would be some hilarity. But you know what? I wouldn't even put it past them. They would build a bridge if they were able to. I mean, they're doing it in Africa, right? They have such an initiative there that it's working out. But this is just where we are. Understand that we have to be able to take all these pieces of information and understand the overview of it all. It's all coordinated to a degree, and every bit of it adds to the eventual goal of destabilization. So you create a biolab in California and release some stuff on accident, destabilizes that region. You buy land around a very important Air Force base and then create some kind of calamity or chaotic event that requires an entire restructuring of that installation or who knows what else. More destabilization. You buy land and sue farmers and start hurting American agriculture in the process, right? You kind of see where this is going. Everything adds up. And especially when you want to talk about this cyber situation where malware is installed throughout our power grid and throughout our military installations, it's just chaos, chaos, chaos. So there's a lot of things happening here that we have to be very vigilant about, because it could be any moment in time where they literally pull that plug. And I used to say that more figuratively, but now I'm saying it more literally. Like they can just turn things off, and that's not a good feeling. Now, a lot of people have that sentiment from the story or the book Red Dragon, I believe is what it was called, which is related to China basically having a kill switch installed on 90% of our electronics, right? Which is still a possibility. I mean, remember they found those radio transmitters within TVs and stuff a while back where they're like, what are these for? So that's a possibility too, but honestly, this cyber situation does the job in a much less complicated manner, right? They don't care if our stuff doesn't work to a certain degree, but if you can't turn on the lights of your home and 95% of the country has no preparation at all, so therefore no generators, no secondary power options, no way of dealing with the fact that they have no electricity. I mean, shoot, how many people don't even have like an oil lamp or even candles, which candles are sketchy, right? They have their safety concerns, but I mean, at least having some would be a good idea in the sense of having light if it's absolutely required, but a lot of people don't even have candles. So, shoot, I wouldn't even doubt if people don't even own a flashlight. Most people just rely on their cell phone now because they're like, well, I already have a flashlight here on my cell phone, which is totally not efficient when it comes to actually searching for things or when it comes to actually needing focus or even just holding it, right? Do I want to hold my $1,200 phone when I'm walking around in the middle of the dark trying to figure out something that's happening with like a leaky pipe or something in a dark basement? No, of course not. But that's what those people are going to be using because they think they have a flashlight now. They don't need another one. So this is kind of where that thought process has to come in too. It doesn't have to be too complicated. You blanket the entire country with one problem, and that problem becomes thousands of problems very quickly. So keep that in mind as we move along these conversations, okay? Now, Illinois just made an interesting choice. And this is not directly correlated to China, but there's some things to consider here I think everybody should be aware of, okay? Illinois Governor Pritzker allows non-U.S. citizens to become police officers with new law. Fundamentally a bad idea, they're saying. Critics slam the law allowing eligible foreign nationals to become police officers as madness. Now, here's the thing. There's a shortage of police. Was it self-induced? Well, of course. Illinois, do they treat the police well there? No. I mean, look at Chicago. I don't even know how they still have police employed. But you know what? The police who are there are doing whatever they can, but they're very short-staffed. So instead of solving the problem as to why people aren't becoming police and why people don't want to be police and why all the police left in the first place, because we all know there was a lot of things involving certain mandates that created that situation, well, they're just going to go get foreign nationals instead, right? Do you think, I'm just asking in the chat, but do you guys think that this could be a problem if countries like China were trying to, I don't know, infiltrate aspects of our systems and infrastructure in order to gain power and authority and create ways to infiltrate certain organizations? I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, Democrat, signed a bill into law that allows non-U.S. citizens to become police officers in the state, angering critics who slam the idea of foreigners arresting American citizens as a fundamentally bad idea. Illinois House Bill 3751 will no longer require U.S. citizenship as a qualification to become a police officer in the state. The bill was designed by the Democrat governor, or signed by the Democrat governor on Friday, and will go into effect on January 1st, 2024, despite facing heavy opposition from GOP lawmakers and prominent police groups. The bill provides that an individual who is not a citizen but is legally authorized to work in the United States under federal law is authorized to apply for the position of police officer, subject to all requirements and limitations other than citizenship to which other applicants are subject. Okay. Adding that non-U.S. citizens must be able to obtain, carry, purchase, or otherwise possess a firearm under federal law to apply for the job. Now, here's something I want everyone to keep in mind. Okay. Most of the foreign nationals that are coming into the country illegally or in alternative ways don't have criminal records. A lot of these military-aged males that are literally from China that have been entering through the U.S. southern border as well as the northern border don't have criminal history or records for any of these organizations to rely on. Therefore, everybody coming through would get through the smell test relatively easily. There's not very many ways to vet every single person that comes through the door, right? So you're allowing for a lot of people who don't have any other reason to deny access to systems and infrastructure and security apparatuses that wouldn't otherwise be able to access them. And these are just things to consider. And when I was talking about complicity earlier in the chat, the complicity of some of these states and some of these lawmakers at least makes you question the motives and, I don't know, who maybe finances their campaigns or what lobbyists they're working with. Because it just seems that these scenarios tend to unfold and be more active in certain parts of the country where you have certain politicians and lawmakers that are more inclined to work with some of these entities. That's just how I have to look at it. I don't know what else to say. Are there people who are complicit on both sides of the proverbial political aisle? Of course. There are people in the GOP who are very complicit with a lot of things, especially when it comes to the military-industrial complex, Lindsey Graham. But the other thing to keep in mind is that China is actively on the ground here in the United States at this point in time. Versus these foreign proxy wars that we're involved in are not something I necessarily agree with on a regular basis and not something I necessarily think we should continually be associated with for the rest of time, right? But what's happening here in the country is even more concerning and even more problematic because it's happening like literally here, right? And these Chinese entities are doing things here right now, and yet we're allowing for some of these possible bad actors to take positions of law enforcement officials at this point in time. Which I have nothing against people who are immigrating to this country and taking the correct channels and doing what's supposed to be done when it comes to wanting to assimilate to being an American. I think that being an American should be a dream of many people because it's a great place to be, and we have a great system that you can utilize and leverage for your benefit if you know if you have the ability to, right? But these unvetted foreign nationals that are coming here for who knows what reasons at times, probably just shouldn't be allowed to just suddenly become a police officer. I'm sorry, but I just don't necessarily agree that that's the best idea or the right answer for trying to fill the ranks back up when the people who were already there were probably fine, but you pushed them out through other means, and now you're scrambling and trying to freak out about it. Or, wait a second, freaking out about it. Or was this planned? Do you think they would have actually pushed all these people out of their positions to refill them with people from another country who may or may not have malicious intentions based on their international ties to other entities that want to subvert the American government and possibly take out the power grid here in the United States? I have doubts. I have doubts that there would be any type of plan for any of that to actually occur. Who would ever consider such a foolish and malicious concept? That is ridiculous. Jordan B., I wonder if eminent domain laws would protect us from such foreign land purchases. I think Trump was asked this question in one of the debates. Well, here's the thing about eminent domain. Not something I like regardless, because I don't want the federal government to ever just decide they need my land for some type of military installation or for some type of interstate or whatever else they want to build that they decide I'm in the way of. Regardless of paying me for it or relocating me or anything that they might throw at you as being fair, I shouldn't have to leave if I don't want to leave. So I don't like the idea of eminent domain, and I don't think that's there to protect us. I think it's there to remove us from being a problem if we ever become one, and that to me is an issue on its own. Okay, so Gen X Gemini says American Peril ring a bell. I don't know if that was like for you trying to tell people to subscribe to the channel or thumbs up and stuff, but I'm going with it because I never say that stuff and I forget sometimes. So yeah, do those things if you're here to learn or at least like understand where we're at in the world. Okay, so this is just what's happening. I don't necessarily like that concept, but it's happening in Illinois, which means you can expect it to happen in other states, probably that sway more towards that political ideology. And that's unfortunate because people of all backgrounds and all ideologies live in every single state in every community, right? So we shouldn't divide things like, well, that state wanted it, so I guess you can have what you wanted. No, this is America. We need all of America to operate correctly. We need all of America to be secure from these foreign entities. And we also need all of us to be able to work together and support each other. Some of us don't want to be where we're at, and we're just there because we have to be, or we don't have the support or the resources to do anything about it at this moment in time. Yes, you can move. Yes, you can make sacrifices. Yes, things can change. Sometimes those things take time. Sometimes those things take, years in order to save and to put together money and resources to make that type of decision. That's great, but in the meantime, those people are still there. So I don't try to wish anything ill upon people who live in these states just because of circumstance. It's not their fault necessarily, and I don't feel like we should ever kind of write people off just because of where they are based on circumstance, right? I know for a fact there's some great people in Illinois that I don't think want to have any of this stuff happening. The other thing to keep in mind too is there's a lot of companies in Illinois that support, Second Amendment related industries, and they're still there too, which is crazy. But at the same time, I'm sure they don't want to be part of this either. So keep all that in mind. And speaking of that, I'll just mention it now. The biggest supporter of the channel is Midway USA, and I really appreciate what they've done for me, and we have a really good relationship, and it's going really well. So if you're worried about making sure you're prepared and you have what you need, whether or not that's long-term storage food or whether or not that's things related to self-defense or who knows what else, Midway USA helps me out a lot, so it helps me out if you support them as well. So I appreciate that, and great relationship with them. It's been going really well, and I'm looking forward to working with them into the future. So now, what else is going on? So you know how I said if China got mad at us, they could start pulling the plug on certain items and certain, let's just call it equipment that might be useful for us in the preparedness community? Let me tell you something right now. Get a drone. Doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be a great one. It doesn't have to have all the capabilities. Like I've been looking at trying to get one that has like thermal capabilities because I think that would be really cool and also beneficial. But I can't afford it right now. I mean, they're like $2,000. I'm literally not gonna lie to you guys. I can't afford to buy a drone of that price range right now. But I'm gonna buy a drone of some kind because China doesn't want us to have them anymore. And this is something you should definitely consider because I'm sorry, I would love to buy American-made drones, don't get me wrong, but I'm sure if there are some, I can't afford them. And in all honesty, like right now, what I can afford is one of these Chinese drones. China imposes curbs on drone exports, citing Ukraine and concern about military use. Okay. Like, seriously, this is happening. July 31st is when this came out. These things are happening. And I don't know if you guys watched Alaska Prepper's video today. Love Rudy, super cool guy. If you don't know about Alaska Prepper, make sure you check out his channel. Rudy's super awesome guy. But one thing I will say is, he just mentioned about how the U.S. just banned incandescent light bulbs, right? So that's ridiculous. And here we are, I guess. Like, I mean, look, I understand they're not as energy efficient, but let me buy them if I want them, right? Either way, China's saying we don't want to send you guys drones anymore. And drones are the next step when it comes to preparedness, when it comes to self-defense, when it comes to defending your property, when it comes to surveillance. Drones have a lot of uses that we should all at least have like one drone in our inventory because, I mean, the amount of reconnaissance you can accomplish with a drone is wild, okay? And we're seeing how just prevalent they are in this conflict overseas right now. It is like the next phase of small arms kinetic conflict. Like you got to have a drone in your unit. You got to have a drone in your team. Your mag should have a drone, right? So you should have a drone guy. I'm not the drone guy, but I might end up being the drone guy because I don't know if everyone else is just getting all drone crazy. But I got to get a drone. Is all I'm saying. Like a good one. We all have like a cheap drone, but I want like a good drone. But anyway, China imposed restrictions Monday on exports of long-range civilian drones, citing the war overseas and concern that drones might be converted to military use. Oh, really? Man, I can't believe they never thought of that before sending thousands of drones to the U.S. Chinese leader Xi Jinping's government is friendly with Moscow, but says it's neutral in the 17-month-old war. It has been stung by reports that both sides might be using Chinese-made drones for reconnaissance and possibly attacks. Export controls will take effect Tuesday to prevent use of drones for non-peaceful purposes, the Ministry of Commerce said in a statement. It said some drone exports still will be allowed. China's leading developer and exporter of drones, DJI Technology Company, one of the global industry's top competitors, announced in April 2022 it was pulling out of Russia and Ukraine to prevent its drones from being used in combat. The risk of some high specification and high performance civilian unmanned aerial vehicles being converted to military use is constantly increasing, the Ministry of Commerce said. Restrictions will apply to drones that can fly beyond the natural sight distance of operators or stay aloft more than 30 minutes, have attachments that can throw objects and weigh more than 7 kilograms, according to the ministry. So you know which drones to be looking for, because that price is going to go up, up, and up. I guarantee it. Like I said, I would love to buy an American-made drone, but right now, price-wise versus performance, I don't see it being a great option for me based on my budget. So if you want something that's capable of doing the things I just said, fly out of your sight, which for me is important in the sense of reconnaissance. I think I should be able to fly my drone further than I can see. Which, I mean, in North Dakota, I could probably see further than a drone should be able to fly. But I meant like, in most places anyway. But also 30 minutes isn't that long. So, I mean... And not to mention things that can carry or throw objects, which I know a lot of you watch Garantham on this channel. I know you've seen the drone video. I know what we're talking about here. So keep this in mind. The drones are going to get expensive. Get a drone now. I mean, I don't know what else to say. Yeah, it's a problem. Okay. And let's see. So the Widow's Diary artist and poet says, absolutely, drones are effective. Just saying. Exactly. I mean, they are. Jeffrey Whitty says Red Dragon Protocol. Right, I understand that too. Like, these drones might be, compromised. They might have a kill switch or something. It's very possible. But one thing to keep in mind is that, Pure Bama Bloods has been eyeing DJI. Look, DJI seems to offer a lot of good features and a lot of good value. But one thing I've heard about DJI, and I don't know this from experience, but this is what I've heard, and I do a lot of research because I'm a weirdo when it comes to buying stuff. But One thing I have heard is that they are constantly changing their model lines and constantly changing like their feature sets, and they basically don't support things very soon. Like as soon as they move on to a new model line, they stop supporting the previous one. So basically, if you're trying to get something that you'll be able to get parts for or be able to get, repairs done for or whatever, apparently DJI is pretty bad about, getting rid of anything that's old and then not supporting it any longer. That's just what I've found. So correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but that's something that I've looked into. And you might be able to say the same thing for 6 hours sometimes, but I'm not going to go there tonight. We're not talking about that. So anyway, drones, man. I'm telling you, like if you want a drone, you should probably get it soon. At least an affordable one. If you want to get a good deal on it. Okay. What else is China stopping when it comes to exports? Now, here's something you guys have to understand. And I'm not trying to preach to everybody when I say you need to understand this. What I'm trying to say is that when we're evaluating this information, we have to understand why it's part of the conversation related to unconventional warfare here in the United States. These export restrictions are part of that unconventional warfare. This is how it's done. It's multifaceted. It's throughout different industries. It's throughout different applications within our infrastructure, within the supply line, within the logistics support of our country, right? If they can eliminate drones or at least remove a portion of them from the civilian populace, that's one less thing they have to worry about if there ever is some kind of kinetic action here. And you can kind of see how that works, right? So you remove the ability for people to own these highly technological pieces of equipment that are very useful in any type of military setting, and then you have less of these things to worry about if that time ever comes where that becomes an issue. So it's just one other thing that you can kind of add to the puzzle of this unconventional warfare scenario, also known as, at this point in time, 5th generation warfare. So here's another part of that equation. A new semiconductor shortage. Again, we're still doing this, but apparently, yes. This came out July 28th, 2023. China has imposed export restrictions on gallium and germanium, two crucial elements in the microchip industry, in a move that many see as both pragmatic and retaliatory against the U.S. Okay. Despite this, experts believe the new rule will not significantly impact the U.S. military supply chain, as it is already seeking alternative sources for these elements. Now understand, they're saying that it likely will not impact it significantly because we're looking for other places to get this stuff from. But China dominates the global production of gallium and germanium, and by restricting their export, it aims to exert pressure on the U.S., particularly during the ongoing semiconductor shortage and the chip war. So this is another part of the Taiwan scenario, but it's also another part of this unconventional warfare. Cut off the supply of the resources. Okay, the United States is friends with Taiwan. They have control of TMSC, so they can get all the semiconductors they want. What do we do? All right, well, let's just cut off the supply of the things they need to make the semiconductors. We can't cut off the semiconductors themselves. We can cut off the resources they need to make them. You see how this goes. It's very quid pro quo in many ways, but it's also tit for tat, right? We're having this back and forth between the two nations. This is preliminary warfare. Like we're already fighting. It's just still cordial to a degree, right? We're having disputes. We're having arguments. We're having trade disputes and everything else related to some of this microchip fiasco, but we're not necessarily shooting rockets at each other yet. Okay. China's announced restriction on the export of gallium and germanium goes into effect in August. Both of these elements are vital to the microchip industry. Many worry that the move will lead to another major semiconductor shortage. As per the new rule, export of these strategic metals now requires Beijing's permission. Exporters violating the rule could face possible penalties or charges. Okay. This is another export that's being restricted right now. So, just one more piece of the puzzle. Get your drones now. Get your NVIDIA GeForce 4070 Super now. Do what you got to do now. Make sure you don't lose out on having your technological superiority before it becomes non-existent. Look, most of us have a lot of this stuff already, or at least access to it. That's great. But a lot of people might not consider some of these things as being, fragile or necessary. I consider having a highly functional computer and something that can handle moving into the future for at least a time while still being able to keep up with some of the new requirements and system necessities to be important. I think that's important for us to be able to keep moving forward technologically, because that train's not going to stop unless it hard stops, right? So that's something I invest in. I also invest in things that I think will help me with certain innovations down the road. And I think getting a nice high quality drone is a great idea. And I think a lot of us have known that for a long time. My investment strategy towards that was to get something extremely high quality and capable, like I said, with possible thermal technology, in order to kind of demonstrate that for the preparedness community, while also having something extremely cool and capable for myself, let's be honest. But because I can't afford to do that right now, and because of this export limitation going into effect, I'm going to have to probably make a move sooner than I anticipated, which means I have to compromise on the level of quality or capability. It is what it is, but we got to do what we got to do. So, and by the way, if you guys here in the chat have any suggestions for drones to look into that are inexpensive but still decent, let me know, and that'll help me, but it'll also help everybody else who's here too, because I honestly want to get something like good, but I also don't have the money to drop on the level I was looking at originally. So let me know. Please give me a heads up if you have some good intel on drones and good manufacturers that you would suggest, because I'm sure there's tons of just crap out there that you want to avoid. Okay. Now, remember how I constantly try to remind everybody of the correlation between the Mexican drug cartels and the Chinese? With this Reedley, California biolab, one of the things I mentioned within that video was the idea that these are profitable endeavors. And pandemics were proven to be extremely profitable, whether or not you want to look at it from the standpoint of the pharmaceutical companies or the medical companies that are producing the PPE and the testing equipment and everything else, right? Well, the drug cartels aren't dumb. They see that opportunity as well. So I have zero doubts that the drug cartels are involved with some of these Chinese labs. It just makes sense, especially considering the fact that the cartels already run fentanyl labs and all types of chemistry labs all over the place. It only makes sense. And they'll make money off of COVID tests just as easily as they'll make money off of cocaine. They don't care what it is. If it's profitable and they can do it in a way that's illegal, that avoids taxes and regulations and licensing and everything else, they're going to do it. Okay? This is an example of that. And this is a reminder that these entities work together, which is another reason why they're so well established here in the States and why they're so capable of flying under the radar. The drug cartels have had to fly under the radar forever. So does the Chinese need assistance with that at times? Probably. Who do they go to? The people who are really good at doing it, have been doing it for a long time. The drug cartels. Biden's FDA will boost cartels from Mexico and China. Weird. Why would those two be put in the same sentence? I have no idea. This seems weird. And yeah, this is interesting, but you'll appreciate it. The Food and Drug Administration looks poised to introduce an outright ban on menthol cigarettes, a product favored by over 18.9 million Americans. That's much more than an inconvenience. It paves the way for Mexican drug cartels and Chinese state-backed purveyors of counterfeit cigarettes to gain a foothold inside American borders. One more income stream. Just one more. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what they're selling. They do have their ties with, let's just call it, bad religion. Okay? They have their ties with that, of course. But a lot of the things that they're engaged in, especially the more heinous and atrocious crimes that they are, complicit in, all of it's driven by profit more than any other thing. That's why they do it. If they can make money with it, they will do it. All the way down to selling counterfeit cigarettes. Thanks to America's appallingly policed drug laws, there's already rampant activity from Mexican-led criminal gangs in the U.S., according to the DEA. Around 90% of the drugs sold in American cities like Chicago come from Mexico. Much of that trade is down to a single mob boss named Nemesio Cervantes, known as El Mencho, whom the DEA estimates is behind 1/3 of the drugs sold in the U.S. Sounds like a very powerful guy. I don't want anything to do with him, all right? No doubt, El Mencho and his associates will leap on the opportunity to peddle products to a whole new market in the United States, those who don't take drugs but do smoke menthol cigarettes. When law-abiding citizens find they can no longer purchase their menthols legally, all the evidence from studies of similar policies suggests they will turn straight to illicit vendors. It's not just Mexican criminals who stand to benefit from this black market boon. A 2015 FDA-backed study titled Understanding the U.S. Illicit Tobacco Market identifies China as the source of the most of the world's counterfeit cigarettes. In 2021, intrepid journalists lifted the lid on a single Chinese state-backed company which produces almost 50% of worldwide cigarette production and already funnels its products illegally into countries across Europe, the Middle East, and Latin America. The U.S. government might as well put up a banner at the border saying black market tobacco salesmen welcome. Okay? So first off, this ban is pretty interesting. I mean, people are going to smoke what they want to smoke, all right? Do I smoke? No. But I'm not here to tell someone else not to or whatever. You know, we're Americans. We should be able to make these decisions for ourselves. And even if you consider it a bad decision, it's not your decision to make if it's not you, right? But the thing that you should really keep in mind too is that I don't know how involved you are with certain, demographics of the United States, but there is definitely widespread use of menthol cigarettes in some of the more African American neighborhoods within our country, and that's just the way it is. And this targets them disproportionately in many ways. That's just the truth. So this is just one more, situation where the FDA and the federal government is targeting, the black community and creating another black market scenario within that community, which is only going to create, more crime and more, police involvement in those areas, which is obviously not what we're looking for here at this point in time. We all know what happened back in the 80s when it came to certain paraphernalia and certain drugs that were dispersed within those communities, and now it looks like there might be another targeting situation. This is just my opinion, and that's just my experience when it comes to that information. So anyway, they are definitely going to exploit that, just so you're aware. Now, we got another little story here, just as a reminder that this stuff goes all the way around the country, and it goes all the way to North Dakota. But I do want to mention, everybody, so you remember, I am doing the live chat tonight after this chat, which is the exclusive hangout for Subscribe members and YouTube channel members. So if you want to come hang out and just kick it or whatever and chat about whatever, make sure you are either a channel member, which you can join right now if you want with that join button, or make sure you're a Subscribe member. And if you're not, I still appreciate you 100%. You just have to understand that if people are financially supporting me directly, then I do want to provide them with some exclusivity of content when it comes to how grateful I am for their support. So not trying to ask anyone here for money. I'm just trying to provide additional incentive for those who are supporting me that way. Hope that makes sense, okay? Now, decades in prison for 3 sentences in North Dakota fentanyl trafficking probe. This is from July 25th, but this whole situation is old at this point in the sense of years past, but this just finally got through the court system, but it is a reminder as to how in-depth some of these situations are, okay? A federal judge has sentenced 3 more men charged in connection with an alleged international fentanyl trafficking operation. I wonder who might be involved. U.S. Chief District Court Judge Peter Welty on Tuesday sentenced Daniel Vivas Ciron, 42, of Colombia, to 27 years in prison. He was extradited from Panama to the U.S. in 2017. In 2019, he pled guilty to charges including drug conspiracy and money laundering. On Monday, Welty sentenced Jason Joey Berry, 40, of Cornwall, Ontario, to 24 years in prison. Berry was extradited from Canada to the U.S. in 2021. Last year, he pleaded guilty to a drug conspiracy charge. See, I try to fix these sentences in my head before I say them, but sometimes I just can't get ahead of it good enough, I guess. And last week, Welty sentenced Juan Can Nguyen, I always screw that one up, I'm sorry, Yen, of Pointe-aux-Trembles, Quebec, to 22 years in prison. He pleaded guilty in March to drug conspiracy and money laundering charges, okay? Is it Pointe-aux-Trembles or something like that? I'm going to assume so, but I'm, you know me, I can't pronounce things apparently. Authorities say Ciron and Berry used a cell phone from inside a Quebec prison to arrange shipments of fentanyl and fentanyl analogs from China to Canada, and the U.S. is part of the alleged criminal enterprise. The trafficking led to fatal and non-fatal overdoses in North Dakota, Oregon, Jersey, and North Carolina, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office in North Dakota. So understand that not only do we have multiple foreign involvement when it comes to this, but we also have it coming from prison. So arresting these people doesn't stop some of this activity. Okay? Now, listen to this. The investigation has resulted in 24 sentencings and convictions and nearly $1 million in forfeitures of cash and property. The U.S. State Department is offering a reward up to $5 million for information leading to the arrest and or conviction of Jian Zhang, a fugitive in the investigation. Authorities are seeking 4 other Chinese fugitives. I am not here to try to make people upset about China or anything like that. I'm trying to make sure everyone is aware that there is a multifaceted campaign against America happening right under our noses every day. And if I don't raise the awareness about it, then I don't know if everyone will be aware. And I'm also very surprised about this sometimes, and I want to share this with all of you. And Mike H, thank you so much. Like, I really appreciate that. That's intense. Like, I appreciate the support of the channel. I really do. One thing that always surprises me is, for example, on my post about the Reedley, California secret biolab, right? I was surprised that people were responding and commenting on that video saying, I'd never heard of this. Thank you so much for letting us know. I guess I always kind of assume that if I know about it, then like probably everyone else does too, because I'm just some guy. But I take that for granted that, you know, maybe my level of attention or my research of these topics or whatever else it might be could lead me to more information than what's generally publicly available or at least easily found. So I appreciate people letting me know that they weren't aware of some of these things, because it lets me know that I'm on either the right track or I'm providing good information that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And the fact that it also reminds me that a lot of people might not be aware of some of these happenings that are happening in this country that are currently subverting our way of life in many ways. And this is important because this is the war. Like, this is the next conflict. This is where we are. We have to be ready for that to get worse or to even at some point become kinetic. And the worst case scenario is that they just destabilize and crash our system, right? Because in that scenario, it's not like you're going to have the opportunity to, you know, get with your buddies, get strapped up, and go fight the obvious enemy, right? Like, I really doubt that situation would occur, as much as the half of your community that didn't prepare begins to panic and realizes who did prepare, and then the negative consequences of that realization. That's what really concerns me, and is an unfortunate side effect of this possible action that China could take at any minute. So keep that in mind, okay? It's really an issue. Desert 1776 says, we get what you're putting down, MP, and I appreciate that. I'm glad you do. Now, let's see here. People said, it's okay, man, you're telling the truth. Look, I have to say things in a very particular way here on this platform in order to remove any question of, let's just say, crossing any lines. And when I say crossing lines, I mean lines that were put into place by those who run the platform, not by me or anyone in this community. So, and live is extremely important when you do that, because it kind of like sets the tone as to whether or not you're allowed to broadcast, right? Because if you're broadcasting live, they can't really stop or make you, you know, change what you said or anything like that, you know, which I don't agree with them being able to do anyway. But I also want to maintain this platform so that I can talk to you all and maintain an audience that I can at least give this information to. And if I don't make sure I stay within those guidelines, then we could have some serious issues. So keep that in mind. Not something I like or I have to like, but I do have to work with it. And I think I do a pretty good job of that. Yardbird says I'm a wordsmith. I try to be. It is difficult sometimes, okay? Now, here's a quick one that I wanted to leave everyone with tonight, because it is that time. But before we get going, one more thing. This was sent to me by a viewer of the channel, so I appreciate that. And if you all ever see information that you find relevant or at least concerning, you can email it to me, magicprepper@gmail.com. Look, I might not respond to you. I get a lot of messages. I don't know what else to say. I remember back when I first started the YouTube deal, and I wasn't even really making videos or anything, right? And I would message somebody who was in the preparedness community. For example, let's say a good example would be, you know, survival prepping for normal people, you know, back in the day when he was on. And he wouldn't message back, and I'd be like, well, that sucks, you know, I wish he would have. I get it now, man. I can't respond to every single message. I can't. It's overwhelming at times. It really is crazy. So I apologize. And I'm talking not just community members and not just like some of you awesome people out there. I'm even talking like I have companies that have sent me emails like, hey, we want to give you free stuff and pay you money. And I'm like, I what'd you say? You know, I can't even read the email. So which is fine because most of the time I don't want to sign up for those because I'm not really a big fan of like, I don't know, like the supplement game or the mobile games thing and stuff like that. So you know, it is what it is. But and that has got me kind of you know, taken off a certain list at times when I don't want to promote World of Tanks or whatever. But I'm trying my best to make sure I maintain a relevancy to preparedness here. Okay. I think like where I start to stretch that envelope is when we get into like cybersecurity and stuff like that, but I still think that's important. So I'm telling you the truth here, I promise. These two men were arrested at an AT&T tower in rural Castleton, North Dakota because they were trying to steal copper wire, basically. Now, here's something to keep in mind. First off, these guys were desperate for money. Copper wire pays well. Every meth head in the entire country knows that. It is what it is. But the other thing to keep in mind is that these guys are just desperate. And desperation is going to continually increase in this country. And the more desperate people get, the more willing they're going to look at those copper wires and say, yeah, maybe we should go get some of that. And understand that if these events start to compromise parts of our telecommunications systems as well as our infrastructure, it could create some serious problems. And who knows what kind of value some of these important components of our infrastructure might hold. So always keep that in mind, and thanks to the viewer who sent this over, because I appreciate any information that's relevant, and I just thought that was kind of a good reminder that even simple crimes can actually lead to something more destructive, all right? And I'm not ignoring you, Derek Boodle. I just have a lot going on, okay? Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't ignore anybody. I like all of you, okay? Spartan No Negative. I like AR-10s. I had a really good experience with a SIG 716i. I think it was probably the best value of an AR-10 you can get when it comes to price versus quality. Yeah, let me know what you're running just because it might be something I'm interested in checking out. And I hope everyone understands that I'm trying really hard to just kind of like stick to like the main go-tos when it comes to firearms platforms and whatnot. But and this is just kind of like a quick reminder, but I'm on this like quest to just try to find like the best combination of things on a regular basis. And you know, you can get a bone stock AR-15, but like what's the best combination of optics, or what's the best type of light? You know, what's the best this or that? Like, you know what I mean? So things get really complicated when you're on your quest to find like what works best for you and what would be the best situation to have in an SHTF scenario. And I recently had someone tell me that, and if you guys, I'm not going to lie to you guys, if you want some interesting reading, go look at the comments on my shorts video where I painted my rifle recently. I was just showing everybody what I did, and like the stuff that was said in there was, some of it was surprising. I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I was going to find myself in a sustained fire scenario in Afghanistan anytime soon, but I guess I understand your concern. But like I was told recently that my Wilson combat rifle can't handle sustained fire, so it's not a good option for SHTF. And I mean, I don't plan on sustained fire, and I mean, even my personal full magazine loadout wouldn't be indicative of sustained fire if I mag dumped every single magazine. So I just don't understand where some of this thought process comes into play. I'm not the military. I don't have the logistics of the military. I don't need the same capability as the military, but I do want my equipment to be rugged, reliable, and capable. And by having something made by Wilson Combat, I know the quality is there, the QC is there, and by assembling some of that yourself, throwing this out there for all you AR guys, just so you're aware, Wilson Combat has really nice parts and really nice components, and they are affordable if you buy them separately rather than trying to buy something that's already put together. I'm just throwing it out there. It's something you might want to double check on, because you'd be surprised. Yeah, if you look at a complete rifle, you're going to be like, dude, that's a lot of money. I could get, Daniel Defense, I could get a BCM, I could get all these other rifles. Like, I don't know if I'd get a Wilson Combat for that money, but look at the components. Just an insider secret from somebody who has worked with Wilson Combat on certain projects. I will tell you that, yeah, that's what I would do. So, and you guys will see that rifle here very soon in a video. But I have zero doubts that my Wilson Combat rifle won't serve me well during an SHTF scenario. But the guy who said that to me is probably rocking a Palmetto State Armory rifle, right? Which I'm fine with, because it's probably going to be fine too. Do I think quality is important in order to have things that are maybe more reliable or more rugged long term based on quality control and parts and materials used and the QC used in the inspection process? Yeah, I think that's a good investment. But do I think that the guy with a PSA rifle is going to be screwed because of it? No, I really don't necessarily think so. That's just where I'm at. So whatever, man. But I think you guys get it. And man, if there's anything I want to say about Palmetto State Armory, it's that I can appreciate them trying to get firearms into the hands of every single American, regardless of what, financial tier they're at. So I appreciate that, regardless of quality of this or that or anything else. That I can get behind. Okay. Now, pure Bama blood. I use 300 blackout subsonic rounds for home defense. Sorry, but that's what I'm rocking. So just throwing that out there. But for the supersonics, because I have a 1 in 5 twist rate on my barrel, I run Federal Fusion 150 grain. They're bonded soft points, and they rock outside of that 9-inch barrel. I get about 1,800 feet per second, and they can take a deer no problem, which means you know what else they can do. Throwing it out there. Look, I appreciate every single one of you. Root Seller likes your Delton. Go for it. You know what I mean? Like, as long as you vet your equipment and you understand its level and capability, you're fine. Do I think having a Knight's armament would be awesome? Sure. Am I going to buy one? No. All right, I'm going to say this right. Am I going to buy one right now? No. Give me a few years when I get bored and just want to try out the nicest thing possible. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see where I'm at that point. But in general, I'm pretty happy with a Wilson Combat rifle, let's be honest. And for someone to tell me that it's not, going to save my life if I need it, it gave me something to think about, I guess. So I appreciate every single one of you. If you need anything else from me, magicprepper.com. Please make sure, if you want to be part of that chat tonight, Subscribe Star. It's a great place to go. Last month's preparedness incentive, Last month's preparedness incentive, I gave a Subscribe Star member a set of walkie-talkies, which turns out he's actually local to me. So we're going to meet up, and I'm going to give him the walkie-talkies, and that way, we can have a quick chat, and I know for sure he got them. But that was just part of the preparedness incentive. Every month I do something different for everybody, so see how it goes. But if you need anything else from me, you know what to do. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.